The Kandahar sky burned red that night, as if the whole world was on fire. David Harper, a 42-year-old staff sergeant with the 79th Airborne Division, sat on a creaky iron cot in the barracks, sweat soaking his shirt despite the chilly desert air. 4 months into his deployment in this barren land, every day felt like a gamble between life and death. But tonight, the weight crushing his chest wasn't the distant crack of gunfire or the ghosts of perilous patrols. It came from an email, a cold line of text glowing on his laptop screen. "Let's be adults about this, David." David took a deep breath, eyes locked on the message from Sarah, the wife he'd shared 15 years with. The subject line was blunt, impersonal. "We need to talk about this." The email itself was just 3 sentences. She'd filed for divorce, she'd drained their joint account, the one they'd built for their house, for dreams of a future after he retired, and the kicker, the part that made his blood run cold, she'd moved her new boyfriend, Ryan, a name he'd never heard, into their home in Spokane. The home he'd poured sweat into, fixing every corner of the kitchen, every window frame, during his rare leaves. He reread the email, each word a knife twisting in his gut. No long explanation, no hint of hesitation, just the raw truth. 15 years of marriage, vows made in a small church under Spokane's golden sun, all reduced to a PDF attachment. David closed his eyes, trying to picture Sarah, the girl who'd laughed so brightly when he proposed by Lake Coeur d'Alene, who'd gripped his hand tight every time he boarded a plane to deploy. But that image felt faded now, replaced by a chilling emptiness, like he was standing alone in the desert with no one in sight. David didn't yell. He didn't smash anything. He wasn't the type to let emotions take the wheel. 2 decades in the Army had taught him survival hinged on a cool head. He stood, walked to the communal showers, and let the icy water wash away the dust and the chaos in his mind. Under the spray, memories flooded back. Not the sweet ones, but the signs he'd tried to ignore. 6 months before this deployment, Sarah had started to change. Shorter phone calls, excuses about late hours at the real estate office, new clothes that didn't match her usual simple style. Then, her phone, always locked with a new password. Always just out of reach. David hadn't checked her messages or rifled through her things. He didn't want to believe the woman he loved could drift so far, but he wasn't blind. He'd felt the storm brewing, just hadn't expected it to hit this fast, this hard. Back in the barracks, David opened his laptop and typed a single word in reply to Sarah's email. Understood. No arguments, no begging. He shut the machine, lay back on his cot, and stared at the ceiling. The steady snores of his squad mates filled the air, but sleep wouldn't come. In the dark, he started piecing things together in his head, like planning a mission. He wasn't entirely caught off guard. David had prepared for this, quietly and carefully, like a soldier always ready for the worst-case scenario. 6 months ago, when Sarah started pulling away, David had taken steps. He'd rented a storage unit on the outskirts of Spokane, stashing important documents, his birth certificate, their marriage license, the deed to their house in his name thanks to the VA loan, and his military insurance papers. He'd taken his grandfather's watch, the only keepsake from his late father, and his mother's silver set there too, items that held value beyond money, tied to memories. Most crucially, he'd opened a separate account at a different bank, funneling a portion of his Army pay into it, not enough for Sarah to notice, but enough to ensure he wouldn't be left with nothing if this day came. Sarah had no clue. She thought David was just a soldier who followed orders and came home with calloused hands, not someone who'd planned 3 moves ahead. David closed his eyes, but the image of their Spokane house flashed vivid in his mind. The kitchen where he'd spent hours repainting cabinets. The small backyard where Sarah used to plant daisies, now with some stranger walking in, drinking from his coffee mug, sitting in his chair, living in the space he'd built. Anger surged, but David tamped it down. He knew rage wouldn't solve this. What he needed was information, a plan, a way to take back what was his. Outside, the desert stayed silent, save for the wind whistling past the barracks walls. David clenched his fists, feeling like he was gearing up for a new kind of fight, not against enemies on the battlefield, but against the life he'd thought was secure. He didn't know who Ryan was, didn't know when Sarah had started planning this, but one thing he knew for sure. He wouldn't let them take everything without a fight. The next morning, David rose, pulled on his uniform, and checked his rifle like any other day. His squad mate Tommy, a tall black guy from Texas, glanced at him over breakfast. "You look like you saw a ghost, Harper," Tommy said, chewing on a piece of bread. David shrugged, forcing a faint smile. "Just missing home, man." Tommy nodded, leaving it at that. Soldiers like them knew when to let things lie. But as David stepped outside, the harsh Kandahar sun hitting his face, a fire smoldered in his chest. Sarah thought she'd ended it with an email. Ryan thought he could waltz into David's life without consequences. They were wrong. David Harper wasn't a man who went down easy. This battle was just beginning, and he was ready. David's days in Kandahar blurred into a haze of patrols, briefings, and the relentless desert heat, but that email from Sarah lingered like a splinter under his skin. He kept his routine tight, rifle checks, radio calls, quick meals of MREs. But his mind was elsewhere, turning over every detail of her betrayal. Who was Ryan? How long had this been going on? And why now, when he was half a world away, unable to confront her face to face? The questions gnawed at him, but David didn't let them show. To his squad, he was still Harper, the guy who could spot an IED from 100 yards and crack a dry joke to keep morale up. Inside, though, he was mapping a battlefield no one else could see. 2 weeks after the email, during a rare moment of downtime, David sat in the base's cramped internet cafe, a concrete box with flickering fluorescent lights and a half-dozen outdated computers. He logged into his personal email, half expecting another bombshell from Sarah. Instead, he found a notification from their bank, a withdrawal alert. His stomach dropped. He opened the app, fingers steady despite the dread creeping up his spine. The joint account balance was down to $19.43. Their savings, $62,000, 0 cents they'd scraped together over years, was gone, transferred to an account he didn't recognize. David stared at the screen, the numbers burning into his retinas. Sarah hadn't just left him. She'd gutted their life together. He locked the phone, leaned back in the chair, and let out a slow breath. Around him, other soldiers typed messages home or laughed at grainy YouTube clips, oblivious to the earthquake rocking his world. David's first instinct was to call the bank, demand answers. But he stopped himself. Kandahar wasn't the place for that. A base phone call could be overheard, and he didn't trust the spotty internet to keep his moves private. Besides, he needed more than outrage. He needed proof, leverage, something to turn this ambush back on Sarah and her mystery man. That night, lying on his cot, David pulled out a small notebook he kept in his gear. Under the dim glow of a flashlight, he started a list. Call bank, check VA loan docs, contact Michael. Michael Reed was an old Army buddy from his first tour in Iraq, now a lawyer in Seattle who specialized in military family cases. If anyone could help him navigate this mess, it was Michael. David added another line, home security system. Last year he'd installed cameras around the Spokane house, inside and out, after a string of neighborhood break-ins. They uploaded to a cloud server, accessible from anywhere. Sarah probably forgot they existed, or maybe she assumed he wouldn't check. Big mistake. The next day, during a lull between missions, David borrowed a secure line in the comms tent. He called Michael, keeping his voice low. "Mike, it's Harper. I need your help. Discreet." "Jesus, Dave, you sound like you're planning a covert op," Michael said, half laughing. "Oh, what's up?" David didn't sugarcoat it. "Sarah filed for divorce, emptied our accounts, moved some guy named Ryan into our house. I think she's pulling something bigger, but I'm stuck in Kandahar." Michael's tone shifted, all business. "You got any proof? Bank statements? Emails?" "Not yet, but I've got cameras at the house. And a bad feeling." "Trust that feeling," Michael said. "Send me everything you've got. Email, bank alerts, whatever. I'll start digging. Don't do anything stupid, okay? No calling her, no threats. Let me work the legal side." "Understood," David said, echoing his reply to Sarah. He hung up, a flicker of relief cutting through the tension. Michael was a bulldog when it came to protecting soldiers' rights. If Sarah was hiding something, he'd find it. Back in the barracks, David logged into the home security app on his phone, heart pounding as the feed loaded. The first image hit him like a punch. a black pickup truck in their driveway, one he'd never seen. Then the interior cameras. Ryan, a wiry guy with a cheap tattoo on his forearm, walking their dog Max through the living room. He was wearing David's old Seahawks hoodie, sipping from David's favorite mug. And there was Sarah, laughing in the kitchen, her hair different, shorter, dyed blonder, like she was already someone else. David's grip tightened on the phone, but he didn't look away. He watched Ryan toss Max a treat, watched Sarah lean against the counter he'd refinished himself. It wasn't just betrayal. It was invasion. He saved the footage, emailed it to Michael with a note. "This is them, check out the truck." Then he added another line to his notebook, "Find out who Ryan is." David didn't know it yet, but that footage was the first crack in a much bigger scheme, one that would drag him deeper than he ever imagined. A week later, Michael called back on the secure line. "Dave, you sitting down?" "Spit it out, Mike." "Your wife's new guy?" "Ryan Kessler. Small-time hustler with a rap sheet. 2 DUIs, a fraud charge he skated on in 19. But here's the real kicker. I pulled your mortgage records. Someone tried to refinance your house 3 months ago, used your signature." David's jaw clenched. "I didn't sign anything." "I know. It's a forgery. Not a bad one, but sloppy enough to catch. And guess who's listed as co-applicant? Kessler." Davian's mind raced. Sarah wasn't just leaving him, she was trying to cash out their home, his home. The one he'd bought with his VA loan. "How much?" he asked. $350,000 in equity. They got about half of it before the bank flagged it. The rest is frozen, but Sarah's been moving money around for weeks. Small transfers at first, then bigger ones. She started the day you deployed. David rubbed his temple, the pieces clicking together. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment affair. It was planned, calculated. What else? There's a real estate guy involved, Mark Thompson. Shady as hell, specializes in quick sales, cash deals. I think they're planning to flip your house, Dave. Sell it cheap to one of Thompson's buyers and split the profit. David's blood ran cold. His house, the one he'd painted, repaired, made into a home, was just a pawn in their game. "Can we stop it?" "We can do more than stop it," Michael said, a grin in his voice. "We can bury them. But I need you to stay sharp. I'm reaching out to a contact at the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. This smells like a bigger operation, maybe targeting other military families. Your cameras might be the break we need." David nodded, even though Michael couldn't see him. "What do I do now?" "Keep quiet, don't tip Sarah off, send me every scrap of footage you get. And Dave, you're not alone in this, we're gonna nail these bastards." Hanging up, David felt a shift inside him. Not relief, not yet, but focus, the kind he got before a mission, when the plan was set and the target was clear. He opened the security app again, watching Ryan and Sarah move through his house like they owned it. But they didn't, not yet, and if David had anything to say about it, they never would. That night, he lay awake, the desert wind howling outside. He thought about the other soldiers around him, men with families back home, men who trusted their spouses to hold down the fort while they risked their lives. How many others had been blindsided like this? How many had lost everything to schemes cooked up while they were dodging bullets? The thought lit a fire in him, not just for himself, but for all of them. David didn't know it, but he was about to uncover a conspiracy that stretched far beyond his own betrayal. A web of fraud preying on the families of the deployed, orchestrated by men like Ryan and Thompson, with Sarah caught in the middle. The footage from his cameras would become a weapon, one that could bring down not just his wife's lover, but an entire network. And as he closed his eyes, a plan forming in his mind, David Harper made a silent vow. He'd fight this war on his terms, and he'd win. The Kandahar sun rose harsh and unforgiving, painting the base in shades of gold and grit. David Harper moved through his morning routine, gear check, briefing, a quick coffee that tasted like burnt dirt, but his mind was 1,000 miles away, tethered to Spokane and the footage burning a hole in his phone. The images of Ryan Kessler strutting through his house, Sarah's laughter echoing in the kitchen he'd built, played on a loop in his head. It wasn't just personal anymore. Michael's call had cracked open something bigger, something uglier, a scheme that could be bleeding other soldiers dry while they were out here fighting for their lives. David's first stop after breakfast was the comms tent, where he checked for updates from Michael. A new email waited, subject line, "You're not going to believe this." Attached was a PDF bank records Michael had pulled through a contact. David scanned the numbers, his pulse quickening. The refinance attempt on his house wasn't a one-off. There were multiple transfers, some as recent as last week, funneling money to an account tied to Mark Thompson, the real estate hustler Michael had flagged. One transaction stood out, $15,000, 0 cents, labeled consulting fee to a shell company. Michael's note was blunt. Thompson's dirty, Kessler's his muscle. Sarah's either in on it or a pawn. Keep those cameras rolling. David's grip tightened on his phone. He opened the security app, pulling up the latest feed. The driveway camera showed Ryan's black pickup again, parked crooked like he didn't care who noticed. Inside, Ryan was pacing the living room, phone to his ear, gesturing wildly. Sarah was nowhere in sight. David turned up the volume, catching fragments of Ryan's conversation. "Need it listed by Friday. Buyer's ready. Don't care what she says, just get it done." The call ended and Ryan tossed the phone on the couch, muttering something David couldn't make out. Then he grabbed Max's leash and headed out, leaving the house empty. David saved the clip and sent it to Michael with a single line. "He's pushing to sell. What's next?" He didn't have to wait long for a reply. Michael's email came within the hour. "FBI's interested, sending an agent to Spokane to pull records. Sit tight, but check your pension accounts. Make sure they haven't touched those." The mention of his pension sent a chill through David. His military benefits were his lifeline, the one thing he'd counted on for a future after the Army. If Sarah and Ryan had gotten their hands on that, he shook the thought off, forcing himself to focus. He couldn't check those accounts from the base without risking exposure, but he added it to his notebook: secure pension, call benefits office. Every move had to be precise, like defusing a bomb. One wrong step and everything could blow up. That afternoon, during a dusty patrol through a nearby village, David's squad mate Tommy noticed his silence. "You're quieter than usual, Harper," Tommy said, scanning the horizon with his rifle. "Something eating you?" David hesitated. He trusted Tommy. They'd pulled each other out of tight spots more than once, but spilling his guts wasn't his style. "Just family stuff," he said finally, keeping his eyes on the dirt road ahead. Tommy nodded, not pushing. "You need to talk, I'm here." "Ain't much else to do out here?" "Appreciate it," David said, meaning it. But he couldn't share this yet. Not until he knew the full scope of what he was up against. Back at base, David's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. His heart skipped. Sarah? But the message was from Michael, using a burner. "FBI agent's name is Carter. She's meeting me tomorrow. Send more footage if you've got it. Stay frosty." David exhaled, relieved it wasn't Sarah trying to pull him into a trap. He checked the security app again, downloading clips from the past 24 hours. One caught his eye. A late-night feed from the kitchen, time-stamped 2 a.m. Sarah was there, alone, staring at a laptop. Her face was tense, fingers hovering over the keys like she was debating something. Then she typed quickly, shut the laptop, and buried her face in her hands. David rewound the clip, watching it twice. Was she regretting this, or was she covering her tracks? He sent it to Michael with a note. "Not sure what she's doing here. Thoughts?" Michael's reply came fast. "Could be guilt. Could be damage control. Either way, it's leverage. Carter's digging into Thompson's deals. Found 2 other houses tied to him, both sold while the owners were deployed. This is bigger than we thought." David leaned against the barracks wall, the weight of it sinking in. Ryan and Thompson weren't just after his house. They were running a racket, preying on soldiers' families, exploiting the trust that held military marriages together. The thought made his stomach churn, but it also sharpened his resolve. This wasn't just about saving his own skin anymore. It was about stopping these vultures before they hurt anyone else. The next day, David got a secure call from Michael, his voice tight with excitement. "Carter's got something. Thompson's been sloppy. Left a paper trail a mile long. Your footage is gold, Dave. It shows intent, puts Ryan in your house, planning the sale. Carter thinks it's enough for a warrant, but she wants more, to nail Thompson's whole network." "What kind of network?" David asked, his voice low as he stepped outside the comms tent. Engineer's been tracking Thompson for months, but they didn't have a solid case. He's been flipping houses for quick cash, targeting military spouses with deployed partners. Ryan's his front man, charms the wives, convinces them to refinance or sell. They split the profits, leave the soldier with nothing. Your case could crack it wide open. David's mind flashed to the other guys in his unit. Men with kids, mortgages, wives waiting back home. How many were vulnerable to this? What do they need from me? Keep the cameras on. Any conversation, any visitor, send it. Carter's setting up surveillance on your house, but it'll take a couple days. If Sarah or Ryan slip up, we've got 'em. David nodded, adrenaline spiking. I'm on it. That night he stayed up late, combing through days of footage. Most of it was mundane. Ryan walking Mac, Sarah cooking dinner, but then he found something new, a clip from 2 days ago. Exterior camera, 11 p.m. A car pulled into the driveway, no logo, just a plain sedan. A man stepped out, mid-40s, slick-back hair, carrying a briefcase. Ryan greeted him at the door, and they went inside. The interior cameras caught them in the dining room, spreading papers across the table David had built. The audio was faint, but David caught enough. Listed at $480, buyers offering $430, cash deal, no questions. She's on board, just needs a push. The man nodded, handed Ryan an envelope, and left. David froze the frame on the stranger's face. Mark, Thompson, or someone higher up? He sent the clip to Michael and Carter, his pulse racing. This was it, the proof they needed to show a coordinated plan. But it also meant Sarah was deeper in than he'd hoped. On board, the man had said. Was she a victim, manipulated by Ryan's charm? Or was she playing the game, betting against her own marriage? The next morning, David woke to an email from Carter herself, short and to the point. Footage confirms conspiracy. We've ID'd the visitor, Thompson, warrants in motion. Stand by. David read it twice, a grim satisfaction settling in. They were closing in, but as he geared up for another patrol, a new thought hit him. If Sarah was on board, what else was she hiding, and how far would she go to protect herself? Out in the field, the desert stretched endless before him, but David's focus was razor-sharp. He wasn't just fighting for his house or his marriage anymore. He was fighting for every soldier who'd ever trusted someone back home, every family at risk of being torn apart by greed. Ryan and Thompson thought they could play him for a fool, but they didn't know David Harper. He didn't start fights. He finished them. And this one was far from over. The days in Kandahar dragged on, each one a test of David Harper's patience as he waited for word from Spokane. The desert heat was relentless, mirroring the fire in his chest, a mix of anger, betrayal, and a stubborn determination to see this through. His phone became a lifeline, checked obsessively for updates from Michael or Agent Carter. Every patrol, every briefing, he carried the weight of what he'd uncovered. Ryan Kessler and Mark Thompson weren't just stealing his home. They were part of a predatory network, targeting military families, exploiting the absence of soldiers like him. And Sarah, his wife of 15 years, was either a willing player or a pawn too far gone to save. A month after sending the damning footage of Thompson in his dining room, David got a secure call from Michael. The lawyer's voice crackled with urgency. Dave, it's done. FBI moved in last night. They raided Thompson's office, Kessler's apartment, and your house. Got 'em both in cuffs. David's breath caught. He stepped outside the comms tent, the desert air dry and sharp. What about Sarah? She was there when they hit the house, Michael said carefully. She's not arrested. Yet. Carter's team is questioning her. They pulled boxes of documents, laptops, even found a burner phone in Kessler's truck. Your cameras gave them everything they needed to tie it together. David's mind flashed to Sarah's face in that late-night footage, her hands over her face like she was unraveling. What'd they find? Enough to bury Thompson and Kessler. Wire fraud, conspiracy, identity theft. Your forged signature was just the tip. They've linked them to 7 other cases, all military families. Houses sold under market value, refinances pushed through with fake signatures. Carter says it's one of the biggest scams they've seen, targeting vets. David's jaw tightened. 7 other families, 7 other soldiers who'd come home to nothing, blindsided like he'd been. And Sarah? He asked again, voice low. Michael hesitated. She's claiming she didn't know the full scope, says Kessler fed her lies, told her you were hiding money, planning to ditch her. She admits to the refinance, says it was his idea, but swears she didn't know about the other families. Carter's not buying it, but they're giving her a chance to come clean. David stared at the horizon, the red sand blurring into the sky. Part of him wanted to believe Sarah had been duped, that the woman he'd loved hadn't turned into a stranger overnight. But the evidence, the transfers, the forged signature, her laughter with Kessler in their kitchen, painted a different picture. What's next? FBI's building the case, but Thompson's already cutting deals, ratting out his buyers. Kessler's not talking, but he's got no leverage. As for Sarah, Carter's pushing for restitution. If she cooperates, she might avoid charges, but she'll lose any claim to the house, your pension, everything. I'm drafting divorce papers now. Clean break, no fault. You good with that? David nodded, though Michael couldn't see. Yeah. Do it. Hanging up, David felt a strange calm settle over him. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was progress. The trap he'd set with his cameras had sprung, and now the predators were the ones running scared. He sent a quick email to Carter, thanking her for the update and offering more footage if needed. Then he added a line to his notebook. Check on Max. His dog was still in that house, caught in the chaos. David didn't care about the furniture or the dish, but Max deserved better than being a prop in Sarah's new life. 2 weeks later, David's deployment ended early, emergency leave granted after Michael pulled strings with the base commander. He boarded a C-17 back to the States, the hum of the engines drowning out his thoughts. When he landed in Spokane, he didn't go home. Instead, he checked into a motel downtown, a nondescript place with thin walls and a flickering neon sign. Michael met him there, sliding a folder across the table in the diner next door. Divorce papers, Michael said, sipping black coffee. Sarah signed them yesterday. Full restitution. Every cent she took from the accounts, plus the refinance money. She's giving up the house, your benefits, all of it. In exchange, you don't press charges for the forgery. David flipped through the papers, his name and Sarah's in stark black ink. She agreed to this willingly? Carter leaned on her hard, Michael said, showed her the footage, the bank records. She knew she was cornered. Her lawyer's pushing for a fresh start, says she's moving to Oregon, back to her parents' place. David signed the papers, his hand steady. In Kessler. Thompson. Both pleaded guilty. Kessler got 8 years, fraud, conspiracy, the works. Thompson's looking at 12, maybe more. FBI's still tracking their buyers, but your case was the linchpin. Carter says you saved a lot of folks from losing everything. David nodded, the words sinking in. He'd wanted justice, but this felt bigger, like he'd fought for more than just himself. What about the house? It's yours, free and clear. Bank reversed the refinance after the fraud came out. You can sell it, keep it, whatever you want. David leaned back, staring at the diner's cracked ceiling. The house wasn't home anymore. Too many ghosts lingered in those walls. Sarah's laugh, Kessler's boots on his floor. I'm selling, he said finally. Start fresh. Michael clapped his shoulder. Good call, man. You deserve it. The next day, David drove to the house, his old pickup rattling down familiar streets. The for sale sign was already up, courtesy of a realtor Michael trusted. He stepped inside, the air heavy with memories. Max bounded over, tail wagging, and David knelt to scratch his ears, a lump in his throat. You're coming with me, buddy, he murmured. He grabbed a few things, his grandfather's watch, a photo of his parents, Max's favorite toy, and left the rest. The past could stay here. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized, the house sold for a fair price. David used the money to buy a small cabin in Montana, tucked in the Bitterroot Valley, where the mountains stood tall and the nearest neighbor was a mile away. He took early retirement from the Army after 20 years, his pension secure, his scars, physical and otherwise, proof of a life hard fought. The cabin was simple, 2 bedrooms, a wood stove, a creek running out back. David started doing carpentry for locals, building tables and bookshelves, his hands finding purpose in the grain of the wood. Max roamed the property, chasing squirrels and sleeping by the fire, a loyal shadow in David's quiet new world. One evening, as the Montana sky blazed orange, David checked his mail. A rare event since he'd cut ties with most of his old life. Among the bills was a handwritten letter, postmarked from Fort Bragg, North Carolina. He opened it, curious, and read the neat script of a woman named Emily Carter, no relation to the FBI agent. Her husband, a Marine, had been deployed when Thompson's crew tried to pull the same scam on her. The FBI had stopped it thanks to David's evidence. "You don't know me," she wrote, "but you saved our home, our future. We were about to lose everything, and I can't thank you enough for fighting back when it would have been easier to walk away. My husband's home now, and we're starting over because of you." David read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and set it on the mantel above his fireplace. He stepped onto the porch, Max at his side, and watched the stars emerge over the mountains. For the first time in years, he felt lighter, like the weight of Kandahar, of Sarah's betrayal, had finally lifted. He hadn't set out to be a hero, hell, he just wanted what was his. But somehow, his fight had rippled outward, touching lives he'd never know. The letter stayed on the mantel, a reminder that even broken things could mend, that even a soldier battered by loss could build something new. David sipped a beer, the cool night air brushing his face, and let himself believe in the possibility of peace. Not the kind tied to a house or a ring, but the kind you carve out for yourself, one steady day at a time. The Montana winter crept in slow and deliberate, blanketing David Harper's cabin in a quiet frost. The Bitterroot Valley was a world away from Kandahar's chaos, its silence broken only by the crackle of his wood stove or Max's occasional bark at a deer wandering too close. David had settled into a rhythm, mornings spent splitting logs, afternoons crafting furniture for neighbors, evenings with a book or a beer on the porch. His hands, once calloused from gripping a rifle, now bore the marks of a chisel and sandpaper. It wasn't the life he'd planned at 27, when he'd slipped a ring on Sarah's finger, but it was his, built from the ashes of betrayal and hard-won justice. The sale of the Spokane house had closed cleanly, the proceeds enough to pay off the cabin and leave a modest cushion. David's pension covered the rest, a steady anchor after 2 decades of service. He'd expected to feel unmoored retiring at 42, but the Army had taken its toll: sore knees, a shoulder that ached in the cold, memories that surfaced unbidden in the dark. Out here, with Max snoring by the fire and the mountains standing guard, David found a kind of freedom he hadn't known since he was a kid running through his grandfather's fields. Still, the past wasn't so easy to shake. Some nights he'd wake in a sweat, the echo of Sarah's email, "Let's be adults about this," ringing in his ears. He didn't hate her anymore, not exactly. The divorce had severed that tie, leaving a dull ache where love used to be. Michael had heard she'd moved to Oregon, working at a strip mall insurance office, living with her parents like she was starting from zero. David didn't wish her ill, but he didn't wish her well either. She'd made her choices, forging his name, letting Kessler into their home, gambling their life for a conman's promises. Whatever she was now, it wasn't his concern. What lingered, though, was the scope of what he'd uncovered. The FBI case against Ryan Kessler and Mark Thompson had exploded after their arrests, unraveling a network that spanned 3 states. 13 families, Carter had told him in a final call, had been hit by the scam. Homes sold, savings drained, lives upended, while soldiers were overseas. David's footage, those grainy clips from his security cameras, had been the keystone, proving intent and conspiracy. Kessler was serving 8 years in a federal pen, Thompson 12, their buyers and middlemen facing their own charges. It wasn't enough to erase the damage, but it was something. A reckoning for men who'd preyed on trust. One crisp February morning, David drove into Missoula to deliver a cedar dining table to a young couple fixing up their first home. The wife, pregnant and beaming, ran her hand over the smooth wood. "It's perfect," she said. "You've got a gift." David smiled, pocketing the check, but her words stuck with him on the drive back. A gift. He'd spent years trained to break things, doors, defenses, enemies. But out here, he was learning to build. Tables, chairs, a life. It felt like redemption, small but real. Back at the cabin, David found another letter in his mailbox, this one from a Navy wife in San Diego. Like Emily Carter's, it was handwritten, raw with gratitude. Her husband had been on a carrier in the Pacific when Thompson's crew targeted their condo. The FBI's bust, sparked by David's case, had saved their equity, their kids' college fund. "We're naming our son David," she wrote, "because you gave us a chance to keep fighting." He pinned it to the mantel next to Emily's, a quiet shrine to the good that had come from his pain. That night, snow fell soft and steady, dusting the valley in white. David sat by the fire, Max's head in his lap, and thought about those families. Strangers whose lives had brushed his own. He'd never meet them, never shake their hands, but knowing they were out there, rebuilding like he was, made the solitude less heavy. He'd lost a marriage, a home, a piece of who he'd been, but he'd gained something too, purpose, not just for himself, but for others caught in the same trap. As the flames danced, David's phone buzzed, a rare text from Tommy, his old squad mate now stationed at Fort Bragg. "Heard you're a mountain man now. Proud of you, Harper. You ever need a beer? I'm a flight away." David grinned, typing back, "Bring your own. I'm retired, not rich." For the first time in months he laughed, the sound echoing in the cabin's stillness. The past wasn't gone, it never would be, but it didn't own him anymore. Out here, with the snow falling and Max snoring, David Harper was writing a new story. Not a soldier's tale of war, not a husband's saga of loss, but a man's quiet fight to claim his own peace. And for now, that was enough.